Hello, I'm Michael Reed, Vedic astrologer with over 20 years of experience in the astrological field. If you're interested in scheduling a consultation with me, you can do so through my astrological services page, which you will see linked above. In addition to that, I presently have one ongoing course on the secrets of the Nakshatras and another course which starts on the 3rd of August, but which is presently open to an early registration discount of 10% off until the 8th of May. Now, the second course is on the elements of the Panchangam. These are the 5 energies that come together that can help us to determine the specific overall energy of a day. And I use these 5 components in order to create my regular lunar transit videos and lunar transit articles. Now, as I mentioned, this course is open for early registration until the 8th of May at a 10% discount. After that, the fee will return to its normal price. If you're interested in finding out further information on this particular course and the other course that I mentioned, information can be found at the link above. And we're actually going to talk today about the elements of the Panchangam and how they can also be used to understand the overall arc of an individual's life. Now, what do I mean by that word? Well, they can help us to understand what drives the individual, how they will take that drive and that vitality and grow their life with it, the attitude with which they will approach things, how they will judge whether something is worth doing or not, or why they will do that, and how overall their life is held together. Now, these are determined by the 5 different elements of the Panchangam. These 5 different elements are the Vara, the Nakshatra, the Tithi or the lunar day, the Karana, and the yoga. So let's give a brief explanation of each of those. The Vara is related to the day of the week, but it's calculated in a specific way based upon something called the ancient prime meridian. And there's a couple of differences of calculation for how the ancient prime meridian is calculated. And so some systems differ. The Vara, most easily understood, is related to the planet connected to the day of the week. So for Monday, that's the moon, Tuesday, Mars, etc. But based upon calculation, it may be a little bit different. The Vara determines the creative vitality that drives the day. In addition to that, it will, of course, determine the creative vitality that drives the individual. Then you have the Nakshatra. Nakshatras are related to growth. In terms of the overall energy of the day, the nakshatra determines how that day will be grown. In terms of the individual's life, how would that individual grow their experience of consciousness? And with this, we're looking at the nakshatra that the moon is in. Right? Then you have the lunar day. There are 14 lunar days of the waxing moon and 14 lunar days of the waning moon, and a special day for both the new moon and the full moon. So the lunar day determines the attitude with which the individual will approach their overall life arc. Or if you're looking at the energy of the day, the energy or the attitude with which the individual will approach that particular day. Then you have the Karana. The Karana relates to the doing. You can understand why the individual is doing it. You can understand if the individual feels as if things are really worth doing or not. Both of these things can be determined in relation to the individual's horoscope by looking at the Karana on the day that they were born. In terms of the energy of a day, if you're just looking at the general energy of a day, it helps to determine whether the action is going to be worth doing or how that particular action is, what it's focused on, so to speak. Then you have the yoga, which is based upon a calculation involving the degrees of the sun and the moon, and adding another figure to that. And I'm not going to go too deeply into that. These things are covered, of course, on the courses I mentioned. The yoga determines how the individual's life is held together. It's like the glue that can be used with all the other components to create the specificity of the individual's life. In terms of the individual day that you might be looking at, it helps to determine how the day can be held together or how the day can be approached. So we're going to look at these specific factors through a certain horoscope. And that horoscope is of P.T. Barnum, who's most well known for his connection to Barnum and Bailey circuses, but he was a showman who was notorious for creating hoaxes for the public, like a mermaid and things like that, in order to give people entertainment. And so we're going to look at his chart and the Panchangam elements in order to understand the driving force behind this particular individual. I will share with you some of his quotes that can help you to more deeply understand the nature of how these specific things came together to create the individual that he was. And so we're going to head into the astrological software in order to take a look at that. So before we get going and looking at the specifics of this horoscope, I want everybody to first of all notice my cursor, because this is what I'm going to use to point out the specific factors and to give you a little bit of information based upon these. So let's look first at the Vara on the day that P.T. Barnum was born. The Vara was Jupiter. Now, as you may understand, Jupiter is a very expansive planet. And from a very early age, P.T. Barnum had several different businesses, and he would always use each business that he had in order to further build upon those businesses and expand things, right? So that's just a very simple way of understanding that creative vitality behind him. But to give you a little more insight into the individual and to understand the Jupiter aspect from another level, he also did have a certain spiritual outlook on how he approached this. And so here's a quote of his: "Unless a man enters upon the vocation intended for him by nature and best suited to his particular genius, he cannot succeed." So in short, what he was saying was we can't be successful in life unless we live up to who we are as an individual, right? So that's a good way to understand the Jupiter aspect, the expansiveness of nature, and his belief that a person should live in alignment with the truth of who they were and try to succeed in that particular capacity. Sounds kind of odd for somebody who was also into duping the public at the same time, but we'll get a deeper look at the workings of why he did that here in just a moment. I want to jump ahead now a little bit to the Tithi. Right? So if you remember, the Tithi helps to understand the attitude with which the individual approaches things. And P.T. Barnum was born on Shukla Chaturthi, which is the fourth day of the bright half of the moon. Some of the qualities of this particular lunar day relate to an attitude of discipline in order to expand, or restraint so that one can grow. And so I want you to listen to a couple of quotes by P.T. Barnum in relation to this. He believed in being very disciplined, and he was very disciplined. He used whatever he had in order to further build things. So you can see how he used that Jupiter expansion in order to be a little more restrained and disciplined in order to build things. But let's listen to these quotes. "Whatever you do, do it with all your might. Work at it, if necessary, early and late, in season and out of season, not leaving a stone unturned, and never deferring for a single hour that which can be done just as well now. The old proverb is full of truth and meaning. Whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. Many a man acquires a fortune by doing his business thoroughly, while his neighbor remains poor for life because he only half does it. Ambition, energy, industry, perseverance are indispensable requisites for success in business. Fortune always favors the brave and never helps a man who does not help himself. And this is coupled with another quote of his, which is quite simple, which is, be cautious and bold, right? So he believed in being both cautious and equally bold. And that's very much an attitude of restraint so that one can expand and move beyond things. Now, the nakshatra that the moon was in on the day that P.T. Barnum was born was that of Magha. Now, here's a couple of interesting things related to Magha Nakshatra that took place over the course of his life that related to his overall growth of his experience of consciousness. I'm going to talk about one that happened later on, which Magha Nakshatra is often connected to ancestral spirits. And he really believed that people at the time who were notorious for duping people into believing that they could talk to their deceased ancestors, P.T. Barnum was very big on debunking people who were doing that as a hoax. It wasn't necessarily that he didn't believe that those things could happen. He just didn't want people taking advantage of other people who were bereaved by trying to make money off of them in that particular way. So that's one factor. Another thing that's really interesting is the royal quality of Magha, because Magha is symbolized by a throne. So it also has a royal nature to it. And I want to read to you from some of the things that I have in relation to that. And he took his sideshow to Europe and he met with Queen Victoria, who was really amused by the sideshow. And due to that, it also opened doors to other outlets throughout Europe, including the Tsar of Russia. And it enabled him to take the money that he was making and buy lots of new attractions and further build upon his empire. And he was almost able to buy the birth home of William Shakespeare. So he went on a spending spree after all this and bought other museums, including Rembrandt Peale's museum in Philadelphia. And so he took what he made from showing his shows to royalty in order to further build his empire. So it's definitely how he grew his experience of consciousness. Now, the Karana can be understood on one level as why he's doing this or how he's doing it or the meaning behind how the individual is doing it. And the particular energy, or I should say the particular Karana on the day that he was born was Vanija. Vanija relates to trade or merchant capacity. Now, listen to this. He was always big, even though he was, would create hoaxes like a mermaid and things like that. He was also doing it in terms of how he felt about it so that he could give people a good show. That's the whole meaning behind why he did these things. And so these are his words. I don't believe in duping the public, he claimed, but I believe in first attracting and then pleasing them, right? So his belief was that he was trying to attract them in order to give them a good show. Now, we come at last to the solar lunar yoga for that day, which is Vyatipata, which can be understood as calamity. So the way that all of this was held together was by him presenting to the public what were considered oddities at the time, right? So calamities. He did it quite literally through presenting calamities of the world to individuals in order to give them a good show. So it was very big on sensationalism in that particular capacity. So you can see how the different elements of the Panchangam can be used to understand the nature of an individual. It's a really powerful technique. And of course, these very same techniques can be used to understand the energy of a particular day. And these are some of the factors that I'm going to teach, or I should say they are the factors that I'm going to teach on my approaching course. So let's talk a little bit further about that course and remind you about it. The course starts on the 3rd of August, and it is on the elements of the Panchangam. We're going to learn each of these categories, we're going to talk about all of the different potentials in each of those categories, like Vyatipata Yoga or Vanija Karana, and understand what each of those relates to. There is also a way to judge the strength or weakness of these factors, and I will be sharing techniques with you on how to do just that. There's going to be information shared on the Nakshatras, the lunar days. All of these factors will be at your disposal, as well as me teaching you how to understand the energy of a day by putting these factors together, and equally how to understand the life arc of an individual through these particular factors as well. Now, this is a great course to take in tandem with my Nakshatra Secrets course, but it's not necessary because there will be information on the nakshatras in the PowerPoint for the course, general information on the nakshatras. But if you'd like to understand them much more deeply, as I mentioned, I do have my ongoing Nakshatra Secrets course. And if you register for both of these courses, the Nakshatra Secrets course and the Elements of the Panchangam course, you get whichever course you register for second at a 25% discount. Now, you will have to contact me for the special code in order to do that. But information on both of these courses can be found at the link above. Thanks a lot for watching this video on the elements of the Panchangam in specific relation to P.T. Barnum's chart. Until next time, please do take the very best care of yourself. Bye now.